Hello. Um, I thought I'd wade into this free will debate. I've been reading a lot about the subject. Um, Kind of came to it from a more of a Buddhist perspective back around 2005, but I've also come to it from a more philosophical and scientific perspective since then. Um, And so my name is Derek Sikes. I'm a scientist at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I'm an entomologist. Um, and uh, I just, I've talked with a lot of people on this subject and figure I would try to get all my thoughts stated as clearly as possible into a single video. Um, so let's just dive in. So first, I'm a determinist. What does that mean? Well, I believe as Einstein said, the future is as fixed as the past, and I believe that, and that there is a cause and effect chain from the beginning of time to the end of time. You can't have an effect that wasn't caused. I like this cat here. Um, you know, This is Fern. Um, so all effects have causes. All causes lead to effects. Um, and uh, Cats and dogs. So there's this area of uncertainty in this determinist model. I mean, I've heard some proponents of free will say that determinism is false, or physics has shown determinism to be false. And I think this is, I'm not a physicist, but what I do understand is quantum mechanics is a um, an area where there may be true randomness. That and I side more with Einstein and Sabine Hossenfelder that on the kind of hidden variables idea, and maybe this is shown to be wrong, that we simply don't have enough information to do anything other than uh, give probabilities to certain events, quantum events. But the real question, let's let's say that, okay, quantum mechanics is true randomness. The real question is, what percent of the universe is is random and is sort of influenced by this quantum randomness? When it comes to free will, I think everyone who's thought about this understands rather quickly that quantum randomness doesn't provide free will because it would create a random behavior rather than a thought out logical behavior. Um, and maybe there's room that if you're having trouble deciding between two options, and it's almost like a flip of the coin which way you're going to go because you just can't make up your mind. Maybe that's sort of the quantum side of things, like you're going to go this way versus that. Um, but that again isn't really free will. Now, just to touch on the randomness issue, I think we can all agree that when we roll dice, we can't easily predict the outcome of those rolls, but they don't violate the laws of physics, right? So that if we had enough information about the dice, and the air and the wind, the humidity, all the factors that may be involved in how those dice are going to fall through the air and land, we could predict what they're going to land on. It's not random. Um, it is because you're holding them a certain way, because the air is a certain way, because the table is a certain distance from your hand, because gravity, et cetera, et cetera. All of those factors go into deciding how those dice are going to land. If we had enough information, we could model that. and predicted 100%. So randomness doesn't exist. Um, it is just lack of information that makes it hard to predict um, something, what we call stochasticity. But that's not true randomness. True randomness is the quantum, like when is this particle going to decay kind of thing. So that's one area where I would really like to talk to, I would really like Sabine to do a YouTube on um, how much of the universe is uh, is is influenced by quantum randomness. Because I think it's a tiny and insignificant amount. I could be wrong. But this is tangential to free will, of no real relevance. Now, before I get too deep before I leave the determinism thing, I want to knock down one of my heroes from my grad school days. I read a lot of Stephen Jay Gould and his book, Wonderful, Wonderful Life. I believe that was the name of it. And a bunch of his writings. He would frequently use this idea of rewinding the tape of life and letting it play again. You'll end up with different results. Is something he would say quite a bit. You rewind the tape of life to back before the Cambrian explosion, let it play again, and humans might not have evolved, right? Like that was something that he said quite frequently. And he probably wasn't a determinist. He probably thought the future was not as fixed as the past. Um, I don't know what he thought, but I did get to meet him once. I didn't think to ask him these questions, though. Um, so the problem with that is if you replay, I mean, the tape is a bad idea in general because, of course, a tape, when you rewind it and play it, it's the same thing, right? Um, but let's use his idea that let's say we could go back in time, I could reverse everything to before the Cambrian explosion and just let it play again. Um, in order to have a different outcome, there would have to be some element of randomness. And the only place I can see that coming from is quantum effects. And are quantum random effects strong enough to say, make it so that, asteroid didn't hit the Earth and wipe out the dinosaurs? I doubt it. I think that quantum randomness is not enough to change the outcome of the course of evolution on Earth. There would need to be, there needs to be something different in order to somewhere along that causal chain, you need to have a difference in order to end up with a different outcome. And since there is no randomness other than quantum randomness, it's hugely important to know how influential that quantum randomness is on the universe in order to understand these things. And I don't think Gould got into that, and I haven't heard anybody address this topic properly. I'd like to. I'm sure someone has somewhere, but all right. So, and another little side note, I've watched Sabine Hossenfelder's YouTube on superdeterminism a number of times, and I have struggled to understand it. But if I'm correct, it seems that the current accepted interpretation of quantum mechanics rests on this rather questionable premise that free will exists. I find that to be really interesting, that like an entire field of physics is basing its interpretation on a feeling that free will exists, which is like an unquestioned assumption by most people, most scientists. Sabine Hossenfelder thinks free will is incoherent nonsense, which I agree with. Um, and thus, this entire interpretation of quantum mechanics may need to, you know, uh, change once you realize that there is no free will. And Sabine, you know, I wish I could. I wish I could talk with her to bridge the gap between my very poor, limited understanding of physics and her incredible understanding of physics, without me having to become uh, um, a physicist, right? Um, so I think somewhere we can bridge that gap, and maybe we've reached across, and there's a few weak bridges at this point. I don't know. Um, all right, so let's move directly into free will. Um, First, I don't want to try to knock down a straw man, so I really would like to knock down. I would really like to understand what people who are proponents of free will mean when they say free will. I think the question is, what does free mean in that context? We all know that decisions, just making decisions, is widespread in like bacteria make decisions, computers make decisions. Um, Water flowing downhill is going to go, left or right down a channel. You could kind of say that's a decision. Um, because it's a state change, right? And uh, so it's not making free will is not just making decisions. It's got to be something, and the free is the key part there. And I don't know what that means. I think everyone on both sides of this debate agrees it's not random will. We don't call it random will, we call it free will. So it's not random. It is, we all agree that the decisions that humans make are influenced by our programming, our bodies, right? Our bodies evolved, they grew up in an environment. There's all of these, evolutionary, cultural, environmental, family, society, various physical things that have changed the structure of your cells, in the sense that your DNA is the way it is because of all of these physical things, all these actual, like, nothing magic has happened. This is all just molecules and energy, electrochemical energy changing over time in cells. So, so this is our programming, right? You're going to make a decision. It's going to be influenced by your programming. Now, this is I think getting at the crux of it, because I've heard proponents of free will say, "Oh yeah, sure, your programming influences your decisions, but it doesn't determine your decisions." I think that's the crux of the matter. Those who believe in free will say, "No, your programming determines." It's 100%. That when you're making a decision, you might be thinking about it, for weeks. Every day you may spend 10 minutes, 20, an hour ruminating. I can't decide. Maybe you're doing the research, getting all the facts and figures together to make this decision, this heavy decision. And eventually you make a decision. But what you're doing is you're providing information to a computer in your brain that's programmed from all of this other stuff in the past, and it's processing that information. It's like, this feels more important to me than that. Why now? Why does that feel more important than that? Why are you giving this set of information more value than that set of information? Or why? Eventually, you're going to come to a decision. You're going to say, "This, I'm going to decide to do X." My argument, and those who don't believe in free will, say that that decision is made by your body, by your cells, because of because of their programming. It may have taken days of contemplation to get there, But all that contemplation was done by your cells, by your nervous system, by the neurotransmitters, by the electrochemistry. All of that is physical in processing. It's a computer system. It's got programming, it's got hardware, and it if something feels good, that's because of neurotransmitters. If it doesn't feel good, that's because of neurotransmitters. The feelings are physical. You see, people have a lot of trouble with that. They seem to think feelings are some kind of ethereal, you know, something that can exist outside of a body. It's ridiculous. I don't understand that at all. Um, so um, it's not. There is, it's not magic. So let's do a Gedonken experiment, a thought experiment. This is something that I put forward to. I would like to put forward to any proponent of free will to help understand what they mean by free. Um, so so let's also use this term automaton. If there is no free will, are we automatons? I say yes, but this needs explanation. The very idea of an automaton seems very inhuman. In fact, it's repulsive almost. And why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because automatons are usually thought of as being kind of mass-produced copies. You can just create 100,000 that are identical, and that's very inhuman, because what makes humans so special, one of the things, is we're also unique. So that's not a good, when I say we're automatons, I don't mean we're all identical. That's obvious. It's obviously true that we're not identical. But there's another aspect of an automaton that I think is very relevant, and that is given stimulus X, automatons will perform behavior Y. They will always, their programming is such that if conditions are X, then response is Y. And that's predictable if you had enough information, right? So the thought experiment is, imagine there are two humans, and we don't need to do like 100 humans because we don't got to worry about variation, because in this case, we have two humans that are 100% identical. And I don't mean identical twins. Identical twins are not 100% identical. I have identical twins. They're, as daughters, they are by no means 100% identical. I'm talking in this Gedonken experiment about 100% identical, not just your number of cells, but the number of atoms and particles, subatomic particles, all memories, everything, every bit of matter between these two humans is 100% identical. So their memories are the same, not just from the past, but the last 5 minutes, identical. Okay. Physically 100% identical. Okay. Now, if you believe in free will, let's take these two humans that are 100% identical, have them in a totally white room where you've eliminated as many variables as possible, and you present them with a variety of circumstances that are themselves identical so you have a replicate, right? Science is all about replicates. We need to have replicates to show that we're not dealing with something that's one-off, right? So we've got this Gedonken experiment where we've got a replicate human, and we're going to give them the exact same stimulus, exact same questions, whether it's going to be, do you want vanilla or chocolate ice cream? Or which college do you want to go to in 5 years? Whatever the question is, if you believe in free will, you have to explain how they could possibly come to a different answer, different decision. What's happening physically? You think, oh, they're going to start thinking, and that's such a complex process that one of them is going to think and go off in one direction, and another is going to think and go off in another direction. And maybe that is where a little of that quantum randomness might lead them to have a different decision. But once again, that's not free. That's just a random effect. Um, uh, Free is this idea that there is control by the body. And the only way the body can do anything is through molecules and electricity. Um, so I don't know. Like my argument is those two identical humans will always um, come to the same decisions um, given the same stimulus. And so I don't understand. I just don't understand free will. It doesn't make any sense to me. Um, if proponents of free will think that there's a way around this little conundrum, that they're gonna come to different decisions and it's not random effect, they're gonna have to explain how that happens. Um, and this is another interesting thing, is that science is based on the idea of parsimony. I mean, we prefer simpler explanations, and free will, the existence of free will, is a complex explanation. It's not a simple explanation because it's something on top of the physical processes that we are, and so it needs additional explanation of how it works, and that needs to be a better explanation of the data than the simpler explanation that it works automatically, that our behaviors are automatic. We are automatons. We do what our bodies are programmed to do. And that includes thinking hard about difficult decisions. But you still have to do the thinking, and you can only do the thinking with your physical body. And some people are going to think, oh, I should go murder those people. And other people think I should, become, a scientist and study ants. Whatever you, whatever you decide, it is a physical decision made by your body. Now I'm just going to do a little postscript here because I mentioned Buddhism at the beginning, and I thought I'd throw this out there. But I had a flash of insight, something that the Zen Buddhists might call a Satori experience, back around 2005, when I was thinking, I was listening to a lot of Alan Watts, and I remember him in one of his lectures saying something like, you have, like, we all agree that we personally have no control over the orbiting of the planets or the blowing of the wind, or these other like cosmic kind of happenings, right? He liked to use the word happenings a lot. That was back in the 60s and 70s. And um, and so there's all the dividing of your cells, you have no control over, like this question of how much control you have over things is tied very heavily into this free will issue. But I was like, okay, I was agreeing, okay, we don't have control over the orbiting of the planets. We don't have, but I at least have control over my own thoughts, don't I? Right? Like I decide my own thoughts. And then it occurred to me that my thoughts just happen automatically. They are decided by my body. My body is out of my control because, I didn't pick my parents. I didn't pick my ancestry. I didn't pick, the culture I was born in. All of those things were outside of my control. And you might say, okay, but once you were born, you decided, were you going to become, a health advocate? Do you exercise all the time or not? Like these are decisions that you made. And I'm like, no, no, no. These are decisions your body made, and your body made those decisions um, based on its programming. So um, anyway, I had this, I was thinking about this Zen argument that thoughts are your own. And when it dawned on me that your thoughts are just as much out of your control, your thoughts and feelings are just as much out of your control as everything else that's happening outside of you and happened before. Um, that it's all cause and effect from the beginning of time to the end of time. Um, Free will vanished for me, and I felt from the Zen perspective, I felt this incredible connection with the universe. Like it wasn't just that a lot of people have this feeling like we are a thinking soul that has like been put in the universe from somewhere else, and then when we die, we're going to go, like there's this very odd relationship between our thinking, our ego, our ideas of ourselves, and the universe. And what this Zen perspective did was it united the um, it united my body with everything else, and my kind of like this weird sense of self sort of just poof. It was like I suddenly realized who I was, and who everyone is. We're all automatons. Just like grass grows in the field, humans behave. Um, and uh, they do it automatically. Now, there's a lot of social implications to this, not just the interpretation of quantum mechanics, but how we treat people who make poor decisions, right? A lot of social implications. I think once you realize that people have no free will, your sympathy for people who make poor decisions goes up incredibly. I mean, it's like I think a lot of oh but a lot of our social justice system and punishment, and just a lot of our the way our society is built is kind of resting on this non-existent foundation of free will. Um, if we are just organic machines and we're misbehaving, what do you do with the misbehaving machine? You fix it, right? You don't punish it, right? I mean, oh, my vacuum cleaner is misbehaving. I should punish it. It's like you fix it. um, that if a human, is misbehaving, it might need training. It might need it. It's got maybe bad genes, bad upbringing, bad whatever. The body isn't working right. The brain isn't working right. There is an imbalance. There is various problems. Try to fix those problems. You don't fix them by like throwing them in jail and saying, you know, fix them yourself. Like that's stupid. Anyway, um, I don't want to go too deep into that. Sapolsky spent like the second half of his book Determinism or Determined on that subject, and it's a great read. Anyway, I think I've covered all the topics. Really hope that I've done the subject a little justice, and I'm really curious how proponents of free will respond to the Gedanken experiment. Thanks for listening.